Everyone laughed at the man in the forest until they looked inside his home and were left speechless. The residents of the small town of Joseph had long grown accustomed to the peculiar man who lived deep in the forest. They would occasionally see him in town, rolling through the streets in his self-built velomobile, his face weathered by the elements, his demeanor eerily calm. His clothes were simple, his gaze serene, as if nothing could disturb his peace. But behind his back, people whispered. Why does he live like that, they wondered. Is he poor, or just crazy? No one could understand why a man would voluntarily live in an underground dwelling instead of leading a normal life with a house, a car, and a job. But for Dan Price, this life was a gift. While others toiled to pay for their homes, he had built his own with his own hands. Underground, hidden in the dense forest. No noise, no stress, no bills. Just him, nature, and the gentle rustling of the leaves above. His life was minimalist but free. He had no boss, no alarm clock, no obligations forcing him into the daily grind. People might have laughed at him, but Dan knew the truth. He had found what so many were searching for, true freedom. But what no one knew was that Dan hadn't just built a simple underground shelter. Behind the unassuming wooden door lay a home so ingeniously designed that it astonished anyone who stepped inside. And one day, that was exactly what happened. A reporter would uncover his hidden paradise, and soon, the whole world would hear about the man from the forest. Dan hadn't just dug a primitive cave and settled in. He had created a true masterpiece. His home was small, but designed with such attention to detail that it surprised everyone who entered. In front of the entrance, he had paved the ground with smooth, natural stones, creating a cozy courtyard where he often lay in the sun and read. The massive wooden door, skillfully built into the earthen walls, was just large enough to crawl through, but beyond it lay a warm, inviting underground home. The walls were lined with wood, candles, and small lamps cast a soft glow, and a shelf held books he had collected over the years. The most impressive aspect, however, was how cleverly Dan had designed his dwelling. He had electricity for lighting and small appliances, water pipes that he had connected to a nearby spring, and even internet to stay in touch with the outside world. His kitchen was simple, consisting of a basic cooking area where he prepared modest but nutritious meals. Despite the limited space, the interior of his cave never felt cramped. Everything had its place. Every piece of furniture was practical and functional. It was the perfect balance of simplicity and comfort, exactly as he had envisioned. But how could someone live this way on just $5,700 a year? Dan had mastered the art of getting by with little. His annual land lease cost only $100. Electricity and mobile service added up to just $60 per month, while his food expenses rarely exceeded $150. He bought clothes, tools, and household items exclusively second-hand or found them at flea markets. His job as a cemetery caretaker was more than enough for him, because while others worked to own more and more, Dan had realized that true happiness lies in being content with less. Dan hadn't just built himself a home. He had created a small, self-sustaining world around him. Next to his underground dwelling stood several simple yet well-thought-out structures that made his life easier. A small workshop where he worked on wood projects and repaired old items. A bathhouse, equipped with a homemade solar shower. He had even built himself a library, a small, dry room with a wooden shelf where he collected books he found at flea markets or received as gifts from visitors. His world was simple, yet filled with love for detail. For Dan, this way of life was not just a necessity, but a conscious choice. His monthly expenses were so low that he never had to worry about money. While other people struggled through stressful daily routines to pay their bills, he was free to shape his days however he pleased. He worked as a cemetery caretaker only as much as necessary. The rest of his time was entirely his own. He loved walking barefoot through the tall grass around his cave, taking an icy dip in the stream every morning, or sitting under the starry sky at night, undisturbed by noise or artificial light. But the most remarkable thing was not just that he lived this way, but that he was completely content. No car, no television, no expensive house. Yet he lacked nothing. While the townspeople smirked at him, Dan often wondered who really had the better life. Wasn't true luxury the ability to live without obligations? No pressure, no endless race for more possessions? Dan knew. The world out there was chasing things it didn't need. But he had everything he ever wanted. It all started with a single article. A reporter who had heard about Dan Price by chance wanted to meet the man everyone in Joseph whispered about. He expected to find a scruffy hermit, but instead, he met an intelligent, content man with an extraordinary story. Dan showed him his underground home, his workshop, and his self-built library, and the reporter was fascinated. His article about the Hobbit Man of Oregon spread like wildfire. At first, it was just a small feature, but soon, more and more media outlets started covering the man who lived a fulfilling life with almost nothing. Suddenly, Dan became world famous. People from all over the world wanted to know how it was possible to be happy on just $5,700 a year. His underground home became a symbol of an alternative lifestyle, minimalism in its purest form. Dan, who had kept a journal his entire life, began publishing his thoughts and experiences in an illustrated book. The media attention even allowed him to earn some money from his artwork. But despite his sudden fame, Dan remained humble. He turned down lucrative offers for interviews and reality shows. "I don't need a mansion, I don't need millions, I already have everything I want." What had started as mockery eventually became a source of inspiration for thousands. People burnt out from their stressful daily lives saw Dan as a role model, a man who proved that happiness doesn't come from possessions, but from freedom. While the world became faster, louder, and more chaotic, Dan still sat in his little stone courtyard, reading a book and enjoying the silence of the forest. And this time, no one laughed at him. Dan Price showed the world something many had forgotten. Happiness is not about wealth or possessions. It's about contentment. While most people spend their entire lives chasing more, bigger houses, fancier cars, better jobs, Dan did the opposite. He asked himself, how little do I really need to be happy? His story is more than just that of a man living in an underground home. It is a counterpoint to modern life, where people often forget what truly matters. Do we really need all this luxury? Or is it the simple things, peace, nature, self-determination, that bring the most fulfillment? Dan proved that true freedom doesn't come from financial wealth, but from the ability to make the most of what you already have. Maybe his story will inspire you to stop for a moment and ask yourself, what do I really need to be happy? Because in the end, it's not about how much you own, but how free you feel. What do you think of Dan's lifestyle? Could you live like this, or do you need more comfort? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another fascinating story. Leave a like if this story inspired you, because sometimes having less means having more.